So we're on to our last speaker of the night. It's amazing. Our last speaker is a poet, podcaster, pundit, chronic documentarian, who from his earliest days spends his time writing, painting, and listening to old vinyl albums on the back porch while gazing at the North Vancouver mountains. Published in magazines and journals on topics from hemp culture in Japan to telco deregulation, he is most proud of his handmade literary chapbooks, static montage art, and audio hijinks. An enthusiast of personal translucency, he shares his spiels and writings online under the name Uncle Weed. Please welcome Dave Olson.
I have the strange distinction of being a third-time PechaKucha presenter. First time was here in Vogue Theater. 2 days later, I was in the hospital for a major abdominal surgery. The next time was Inspired Japan, which I was just seriously hungover for drinking with UBC engineers. This time, broke a leg. Just hope you don't invite me back the fourth time, Stephen. So today, ever since I was a kid, I've been finding stories that I love and digging deep into them. If you wonder why I'm so tough, it's because that was a science fair project in fourth grade in Wally. My first piece of social media was a fanzine in which I talked about the then GM of the Vancouver Canucks going to Sweden to recruit hockey players in 1979. Like that would ever work, right? And I read all these lists about Vancouver. We seem to be obsessed about, like, oh, Zurich scored higher on some, oh, those damn people from Melbourne, get off of my lawn. Yet the Vancouver I know and the Vancouver I've gotten to know my whole life is totally different, right? It's full of all kinds of unique, weird shit. So what I'd like to do is share it. Well, do I sound smart with that, Stephen? All right. Fuck yeah. Is share some stuff that you may not have heard, starting with Frederick Varley. For 10 years, I went to school, right? Learned about the Group of Seven. Never knew that this dude named Frederick Varley, the bohemian, the renegade, the slacker, the Group of Seven, lived here in Vancouver for 10 glorious years in the 1920s and 1930s. During that time, he was the founding professor of the university that's now called Emily Carr, whatever college or whatever it is, right? And later on, I learned about him because I live up in Lynn Valley, and I see this trail, the Varley Trail. And this guy started, his paintings hang next to Picasso's and Monet's in London, yet we don't know anything about him. I don't know if it's awesome or really lame that the only thing named after Varley in this town is an awesome hiking trail. Do you think it's because he shacked up with his mistress, who was a student that was about 40 years younger than him? I don't know. I'm not here to judge, right? My next hero I'd like to tell you about is Bev Davies. You know Bev Davies because she takes all those awesome punk rock photos. You've seen all those black and white photos, right? But what people don't realize about Bev Davies is that she's like your coolest grandmother. I went over to her house, and it's wall after wall of all these things, because she shot everything. She just didn't give a shit that she had Madonna pictures from Madonna's first ever show, first ever tour. And here she is, your coolest grandmother ever, and she's still out at shows every night, late night, and doing it because she loves to do it, and inspiring whole new generations of photographers, and including me, where she would give me her photos when I was making my little punk rock fanzines at 14 years old. It's like Creative Commons, but before we knew that was called, right? Find the lights. I'm a big Grateful Dead fan, and I hate San Francisco getting all the credit for all that counterculture stuff. But it turns out in 1966, the Grateful Dead came through Vancouver, and they had a show at the Pender Auditorium, long gone, and they decided to go play a free show at Second Beach. Of course, shut down. So they put on a flatbed truck and they moved over to Kitts Beach, shut down again. Has anything changed, really? But in digging in this story, I found this band that opened for them that whole time, and they became kind of the house band of all these psychedelic shows that came through Vancouver, the United Empire Loyalists. And someone in here knows these dudes, and I want to smoke those dudes out with Sean Orr's joint. Track them down for me, would you? So I love the old punk rock too, and as a 13-year-old I used to take the bus, remember coming from Wally, this is long before the SkyTrain, all the way to the York Theatre, and the York Theatre was an amazing place there at the end of Commercial Drive because you could do all ages, and they'd probably turn a blind eye if you snuck a beer in, right? Like who doesn't, right? Right? And so it was a critical part of my adolescence. It told me that all ages venues are super important. And with my love of venues, I discovered, like these old swampy blues dudes recorded live. You thought, oh yeah, that must be somewhere down the Mississippi Delta. The Bunkhouse, right there in Vancouver. Looked them up in the Vancouver archives. All I could find was an application for topless waitresses and 14 noise complaints. Has anything changed? So I don't want this to be a trip down memory lane because really, as my hero Joe Strummer tells, the future is unwritten. And my wife has been wondering why I've been carrying around this t-shirt since 1984. That's why. And the concrete in this city, as some of these earlier presenters have really pointed out, is totally wet. The future is unwritten in our city, and we have the ability to still shape what kind of city we're going to create here for us. So the way I take this stuff and take this inspiration, they find these stories that I find from traipsing around, I always think about, what do I make not for tomorrow? What do I make from 100 years from now? Right? Fuck stats and make art instead. And worry about that. Don't worry about how many people are going to tweet your click or whatever they're going to do, right? Just make something awesome, and all that will sort itself out. The critical part to this is with your art, you have to be prepared to practice your craft, but at the same time, you can't get hung up on the nuances of just your craft. You have to take risks in order to transcend, to jump off that cliff, just make something that's going to become art that people will care about in 100 years. You know, nature has a weird way of taking care of stuff. Even when it looks a little dangerous, don't be afraid to take a few risks, right? It's the worst that can happen. You're going to bust your leg, stuck on crutches for 6 weeks on the damn stage. So you got to find that part of you, because everyone knows the basic stuff, right? Get out of your comfort zone and find that little something about you that's weird, and go hang out in that space, right? And we've certainly seen some presenters that are real comfortable in that space, but we all have this sort of collective knowledge. Tell this shit about yourself, 18th century Russian literature, yarn bombing, whatever the fuck that is. Tell people about that, right? All right, so I spent a lot of time. Here's my tips for getting to know weird stuff, is get on buses that you don't know where they're going. Get on it, because there's always going to be a bus coming back. Well, usually, right? You ever wonder where Burquitlam is? Hop on a bus. Marpole? See what's out there, right? There's still all kinds of crazy neighborhoods. All right? Okay, so I'm not a member of the booster committee here in Vancouver. I'm not a Vancouver voter. I live in Lynn Valley. That's because I grew up in Wally. But there's a few things I'd really like to change. You've already mentioned the liquor. Look at the old man with the cane. You've already talked about the liquor laws. All ages venues are critical. And I've been to other cities where you can have a beer and walk around, right? You can have pedicabs, and it works out all right. We deserve nice things. And we are at the cusp, my friends, of something pretty remarkable. I hang out in this weird little space between technology. I work for a little startup here in town, you might have heard of, and art and culture, and we're at the cusp of something pretty remarkable here, but we have to kind of get out of our own way, and we have to realize we're actually a little bit cooler than we realize, right? We're always looking at these lists and getting obsessed about other places and what they think of us. Fuck all them and get on with our lives, right? So once you take all these things, before you know it, you can take this information, this position that you're in, this privilege that we all have, and go make something out of it. And before you know it, you'll be filling up this place here while you're standing up here on stage with this beer that you didn't even get around to drinking because these damn 20-second slides, and make something amazing. And I hope you'll go out and do it. And I'd like to thank my friends who helped me put this thing together. And I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you very much.